Hi guys, welcome back to the Social Tune, and today we are going to be taking a look at the latest, highly anticipated album by Ayreon called The Source.
You're all the same when extinction looms.
No food supplies, no water supplies, power supplies, or other supplies. No compromise, just say goodbye, and everybody dies. No explanation, no clarification, no information, justification. Get the why, just cover your eyes, and everybody dies.
You know, metal is one of the genres that I've seriously neglected to talk about this year. Seriously, outside of Gravedigger, I haven't given anyone a serious review on this channel yet. And that's not for lack of trying. I tried writing a review for that Mastodon album, but in the end, I couldn't come up with anything to say about it. The fact of the matter is, I haven't been a fan of metal for that long, only really coming around on the genre about 3 years ago. And while I have explored the genre at length since then, there are still certain subgenres, like death, thrash, and doom metal, that I really don't get outside of a couple of exceptions. Luckily though, I have absolutely no issue with progressive metal, and today's act is about as prog as you can get. Ayreon, a project that I've actually mentioned in 2 of my previous videos, namely my mid-year and year-end lists of the best albums of 2016, where I compared them to their metal contemporaries, Avantasia. Now, in the year-end one, I actually apologized for making that comparison for 2 reasons. One, they're not even in the same genre, as Avantasia is a symphonic act, not a progressive one. And 2, as much as I love Avantasia, they're not even on the same level as Ayreon. Let me explain to you what this project is. A group of some of the best and most respected singers in metal brought together and orchestrated by singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and full-time genius Ariane Lucassen. And under his guidance, they have made 8 fantastic albums in the Ayreon storyline, 4 of which I would consider uncontestable classics. Seriously, they have not turned in a project that I would consider less than 8 out of 10, and as for their best, wow, that's tricky. My favorite would have to be The Human Equation, followed very closely by 010110001, and then either The Grand Experiment or The Theory of Everything. I can't really bring myself to pick. In other words, I had extremely high expectations going into this, especially considering it was set up to be a prequel to 010110001. So I gave it a number of listens, and if I had to compare this to something, it would be Star Wars The Force Awakens, a film that borrows heavily from its predecessor, A New Hope, with several callbacks and even a similar plot. In the same way, this album has a lot of similarities to its own predecessor, and if you've heard that album, you will quickly spot the similarities. But then again, I love The Force Awakens, and in the same way, I adored this. A space rock opera that might not be quite as incredible as 010110001, but is still utterly awesome and is without question one of the best albums that I've heard all year. So let's dive in, starting with the incredible production.
This fateful day, we are gathered here inside this wall, to find a way to escape our pending fate.
Now, believe it or not, all of the instrumentation here was handled by less than 10 people, which is incredible to me and a credit to Ariane's mixing and production. You have Maike Peterse on the cello, Jeroen Huysens on the flute, Ben Mathot on the violin, Ed Warby on drums, Joost van den Broek on the piano, and Ariane himself on the guitars and synthesizers, all of whom deserve a ton of credit for the instrumental prowess on display here. And to talk about why, we briefly need to go back to Ayreon's previous album, The Theory of Everything. Now, one of the big changes on that album was that it was split into 4 parts, called phases. And while there were several tracks within each phase, they all flowed into each other so well that you essentially got an album with 4 20-minute plus tracks. Now, this was both a strength and a weakness, because while the album felt incredibly cohesive, the individual songs didn't really stand out because, well, they weren't supposed to. This album takes a very different approach because while it is once again split into 4 parts, this time called Chronicles, each one doesn't really feel like one single track, despite the tracks within them still flowing together incredibly well. Instead, this album is much more hook-driven, 17 tracks long, and boy do most of them stick with you. From the chugging guitars and the choral swell of Aquatic Race, to the fantastic groove and synth breakdown on Into the Ocean, to the phenomenal fast-paced Run Apocalypse Run that really does simulate the feeling of running for your life incredibly well. Then you have the industrial, mechanical minimalism of the closer March of the Machines, the theatrical cross between steampunk and vaudeville, especially with the pounding drums and the blend of clean and growled vocals with touches of organ on Everybody Dies, the 80s new wave inspired Bay of Dreams, and the lighter guitar plucks and violin on Condemned to Live, that breaks into some really potent minor chords with touches of organ. Or take the more low-key, softer songs like The Source Will Flow and The Dream Dissolves, that are both gorgeous but have some real competition for the harder grooves on All That Was and Sea of Machines, that both still maintain their gorgeous melodies thanks to the folk-inspired flutes and strings. Or hell, take the strings, flutes, and great harmonies on Journey to Forever, that would almost feel too blissful if that weren't the point. Really, the only song that I wasn't wild about was the Middle Eastern-inspired Deathcry of a Race. Definitely not a bad song by any stretch, but it just felt a little perfunctory, which over 17 tracks is bound to happen. And if you want the best, whoa, that's tough, but if I had to pick one, I would go with the incredible 12-minute opener, The Day That the World Breaks Down. Quite apart from the fantastic lyrics summing up everything that has led up to this point, conveying all that despair and yet still showing a glimmer of hope, the composition on this track is unbelievable. It starts out with the historian's narration over a menacing warble, before the flute and cello come in to set up a gorgeous atmosphere, as the violin and drums burst in to mirror that melody, until the synthesizers come in to lead us into the pounding riff of the song's main hook. And there are just too many great moments to count on this one track. From Mike Mills's phenomenal interlude, to the moment Blind Guardian's Hansi Kirsch bursts in before that electric guitar reprise of the opening violin's melody, to the fantastic blues-inspired segment of the track, to the incredible guitar solo that leads us into the surprise appearance from Nightwish's Floor Jansen, whose heavenly vocals close us off on an incredible note. And then you have the fact that all of our musicians, including our 11 vocalists, show up and all get their moment to shine. It's enough to get any fan of symphonic metal drooling, and some of these appearances actually had me crying because I was so happy to hear them on this song. And boy, do every single one of them deliver on this project. I'm serious, the talent on display here on a vocal level is just incredible. It's like Southern Family all over again. And each of the singers takes on the role of a character within the story. So let's go through them, shall we? You have James LaBrie from Dream Theater as the historian, Tommy Caverick from Camelot as the opposition leader, Tommy Rogers from Between the Buried and Me as the chemist, Simone Simons from Epica as the counselor, Nils K. Rue from Eidolon as the prophet, Tobias Sammet from Avantasia as the captain, Hansi Kirsch from Blind Guardian as the astronomer, Mike Mills from Towhider as TH1, Russell Allen from Symphony X as the president, Michael Erickson from Circus Maximus as the diplomat, and of course Floor Jansen from Nightwish as the biologist. I'm a huge fan of a lot of these people, and even those that I'm not wild about usually, all deliver in spades. The only one that I really didn't recognize at all was Mike Mills, who's apparently a singer-songwriter, producer, and multi-instrumentalist from Australia that I've not really heard about before. But after hearing him on this, you had better believe that I'm going to be keeping an eye out for him, because he was incredible here. Definitely a guy who deserves a lot more work. And now, let's dive into the story on this album. So like any good old space opera, it starts out in a faraway galaxy on the planet Alpha, a society on the brink of extinction. This is because the president, in order to satiate his people, put the entire planet in charge of the Frame, a sophisticated machine designed to solve the world's problems. Unfortunately, the machine reasons that the only way to save the planet is to, you guessed it, destroy all of its inhabitants. Once they discover this, a new planet called Sierra is chosen as a safe haven for our 11 main characters, who band together to escape Alpha, leaving their loved ones behind, a choice that clearly weighs on their conscience. Hell, across the first 2 quarters of this album, you can regularly hear the screams of those left behind. It really is quite grim. But lucky for them, the captain has a ship called Stargate, which they all board, where they're all given a mysterious chemical called Liquid Eternity, also known as the Source, before all going into stasis for the long journey ahead. Once they arrive, they awaken as they look down on their new home with a strange mix of hope, relief, fear, and regret, as it's revealed that the new world is Y, the planet at the beginning of 01011001, meaning these are, spoilers, humanity's ancestors. But of course, since the planet is water-based, they had to adapt, which is why they were given the Source, which will change their biological structure so that they can breathe underwater and communicate telepathically. So they settle down on their new world. They've survived. They've won. Except for 2 things. For one, the Source has a side effect very much like Soma from Brave New World, which keeps them happy and content, dulling the pain that they feel from leaving their loved ones behind. But the more they take it, the more they forget about the past they left behind, meaning that they can't learn from their previous mistakes. And 2, one of the characters is TH1, a robot who remained loyal to the Alphans and escaped the planet with them. But since it's a robot, it naturally doesn't take the Source, meaning it can no longer communicate with them. And in a perfect world underwater, it's obsolete. It no longer has a purpose. And so it decides to become the new Frame, which we see in control of planet Y at the beginning of 01011001, while the Alphans have evolved into the species known as Forever, once again dependent on machines and devoid of any emotion, which puts a whole new spin on the Prophet's vision on Sea of Machines, as it could apply to both the new Frame and its emotionless inhabitants. Now this is all powerful stuff, and it raises a lot of philosophical questions about destiny and self-fulfilling prophecies and our desperation to survive. But it is undeniably similar to 01011001, which, without spoiling too much, also begins and ends with a society dependent on machines, and an open question as to whether it's better to evolve or to survive. But I can't help it, guys. I just adore this. Sure, it does have similarities to its predecessor, but if anything, it reinforces the message that history does repeat itself. And I can certainly say that it does enhance the experience of listening to 01011001, knowing what transpired before these events. And besides, it's so beautifully composed, catchy, and flat out epic that I can't really bring myself to be that harsh on it. So if you haven't guessed yet, it's a strong 9 out of 10. Thank you Ayreon and all those involved for yet another incredible album. And as for you guys, check this out, it's awesome. So thank you guys for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. If there are any other albums coming out in the next month or so, please post them in the comments or tweet them at me at @thesocialtune, link in the description. Please subscribe so you don't miss a thing, and until the next time, I'm Finn, and this is The Social Tune, signing off.